Thank you. The next participant is Ms. Shannon Henning. She has a question relating to the efforts to increase the number of Indigenous relations officers. Please go ahead, Ms. Henning.
Thank you. I'm Shannon Hennig, and I'm here representing the Calgary Alliance for the Common Good. The Calgary Alliance, with its numerous Indigenous members and advisors, are asking the Calgary Police Commission to comply with the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit calls for justice released on June 2nd, 2019. The call to justice 9.4.1 says specialized Indigenous policing units are to be staffed with experienced and well-trained Indigenous investigators who will be the primary investigative teams and officers overseeing the investigation of cases involving Indigenous women, girls, and to SLGBTQIA people. It has now been 2.5 years since the Missing and Murdered Women and Indigenous Girls report was released, and very little has been accomplished. Yes, the CPS Indigenous Relations Office and Indigenous Anti-Racism Training for the entire CPS are part of the calls for justice in 9.4.1 and 3. But our Indigenous communities have told us they need more. We need the CPS to act on the calls to justice in 9.4.2. We need qualified and experienced Indigenous teams and officers working with Indigenous peoples. Our plan is to continue to team with the CPS on the ways that they are working towards the calls for justice. However, we are a community organization, and our work is to apply pressure in the direction our Indigenous partners have indicated. That is why we will not stop pushing for experienced Indigenous liaison officers. When we met with CPS most recently on February 17th, they suggested again that Indigenous civilian young people be hired to become Indigenous liaison civilians and discover a career as a Calgary police officer. While this is an interesting and informative idea, the Indigenous liaison officers should be hired first and then the Indigenous liaison civilians later, division by division, until there are 8 of each. When will the Calgary Police Commission get fully behind the initiative of hiring Indigenous liaison officers for each of Calgary's divisions and require that the Calgary Police Service do so in order to satisfy the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit calls for justice in 9.4.2? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And I'll ask the service if you have a quick response to this.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for your comments, and thanks for the comments around our ongoing meetings. We do continue to find value in those and continue to have great conversations. And so the last meeting, we did in fact have the conversation again around the Indigenous liaison officers. We have committed to looking at a feasibility study in the districts with respect to the data that we attend with respect to Indigenous community members. So the biggest piece that we continue to have the conversation around is the mixed messaging that we certainly get from our elders, from different communities that we speak to. So there's a bit of a divide as to what and how many and where people want, if any, Indigenous liaison officers. So we continue to have those conversations with our Indigenous Advisory Board, with our elders, with others, and continue to just look at to see if that in fact is something that we should do. Of course, as was just mentioned, one of the pieces that we continue to have the concern around is our capacity and our resourcing. And although that's not an excuse, that is the reality. So as I said, we encourage these conversations, we continue to have them, and we continue to be at the table to see what is best for our Indigenous community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for your response.